Welcome to this lecture on the water cycle, which is also known as the hydrocycle because hydro stands for water. Okay, in your own words, what is the water cycle and why is it important? What do you think? Well, it's vitally important because our bodies are 70% water. We obviously need a lot of water in order to survive, and I'm not even talking about showers and all the other things that we use water for, just to drink. So where does that water come from? Well, it comes from the water cycle. So all the water that has ever been on planet Earth is all the water that is here right now. So water actually never leaves our planet. It is just constantly cycling through the atmosphere, through ocean, and through land. And this process of recycling of water is known as the water cycle. And it is driven by energy from the sun, specifically solar radiation, which, if you remember, travels from the sun through the vacuum of space, through our atmosphere, to the surface of our planet via electromagnetic waves. And this water cycle is what is crucial for the existence of life here on our planet. What are the three types of energy transference that we just learned about? Conduction, convection, and radiation. And radiation is primarily what is driving the water cycle. So to understand the water cycle, you really need to understand heat transference in the atmosphere. So let's talk about evaporation, which is also known as transpiration. So solar energy warms cooler, heavier water. So the sun comes in and it warms the topmost layer of the ocean, and it's warming cooler, heavier water. And through the process of radiation, the warm water becomes lighter, and as it becomes lighter, it's changing into a gas. So it's actually rising up from the oceans and lakes and rivers and streams. It's rising up into the atmosphere. It's evaporating. So water is evaporating from oceans, lakes, rivers, and even moist soil. This evaporated water then rises up into the atmosphere. So we have incoming solar radiation via electromagnetic waves heating the top layer of water. As water heats, it becomes lighter and transforms into a gas via the process of evaporation, and it is actually evaporating up into the atmosphere. So the process of evaporation from plants is known as transpiration. So it's kind of like plants sweating. So when plants, as the solar radiation comes in, it does cause evaporation from oceans, lakes, and streams, but it also causes transpiration from the plants in that they are releasing water from their leaves. So this first step, evaporation, which we see here, it comes off both of the oceans, and it also comes off of moist soil on the land. And then there's also transpiration, which is evaporation from plants. Right, the second step is condensation, which is water in the form of gas that is rising up into the atmosphere. As it begins to cool, as it rises higher in the troposphere, the temperature is decreasing, so that water is cooling and it's becoming liquid again. This process is called condensation. Clouds form when there are a large amount of water when a large amount of water vapor condenses, because all those water molecules start to stick together and they form clouds. And this process is driven in part by convection currents, because the convection currents are what are causing the gas to rise up from the oceans and the land higher into the atmosphere and cool and then fall back down to Earth. That's part of the convection cycle. So here's condensation. We started with evaporation off the land and the earth, and as the liquid heated, it transformed into a gas, it rose higher in the atmosphere, and it condensed, forming both clouds and also precipitation, which is our next step. So the third step is precipitation. As water becomes heavy, it collects in the clouds, and when it becomes too heavy, it will fall back to the earth, and this is called precipitation, and it falls in the form of rain, snow, sleet, etc. The process is driven in part by these convection currents, which is causing the warm air is causing the water vapor gas to rise up in the atmosphere. As it rises up in the atmosphere, it cools, it becomes heavier, and then it falls back as precipitation. And that's what we see here, precipitation. And the fourth step is runoff. When precipitation falls on the land, some is absorbed into the ground, and this forms pockets of water that we know as groundwater. Most groundwater eventually returns to the oceans. Sometimes it sinks into reservoirs, water reservoirs, but most of it does return to the oceans. Other precipitation runs directly into streams, rivers, lakes, oceans, etc. And water that collects is called runoff. And that is the final part of the water cycle. So name all the steps of the water cycle. You need to know these: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, runoff. So here is the water cycle. Understand that this process is started by solar radiation. It is driven by convection currents. More examples of the different steps of the water cycle. So the water cycle really is water being recycled. So it is so vitally important to care for the water, because the water that we have is all the water that we will ever have. So we really need to take care of our water and use it wisely. See if you can name the different steps of the water cycle as you watch this. Incoming solar radiation, evaporation, condensation, precipitation, windward side of the mountain, runoff. Flowing back to the oceans. It really is a beautiful process. And that is the water cycle. We will do some practice in class, but you don't need to do that right now.